That light too strong, Bill?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff After Hours. This is a episode of Real Crime Stories. A lot of stuff going on in the country with these active shooting incidents. We had one in Atlanta the other day, and just yesterday we had an active shooter in Boulder, Colorado. The one in Boulder, Colorado caused the death of 10 people. And the same questions arise all the time. Is it gun control? Is it mental health? What is the reason behind these active shootings? We're going to explore a little bit of these questions we have, and we're going to also explore the angle that the press takes on these cases. Does it help the public? Does it hurt the public? Does it hurt everyone? Does it help everyone? We have some questions here. And with me today are two retired NYPD officers. One at the top of the screen is Joe Murray, who is also a practicing attorney. And at the bottom of the screen is retired Sergeant Pete Panuccio, who did nearly 39 years on the NYPD. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Bill. Good to see you, Pete.
Thank you, Bill. Good to see you, Joe.
Now, I'm sure you guys have been following these active shooter incidents. And Joe, first, I'd like to ask you, what is your take on this? Is it a mental health issue? Is it a gun control issue? What's going on?
You know, you always hear these unfortunate incidents, particularly with the loss of life, including one police officer that we know of with that shooting, the tragedy of it.
The officer's picture is on the screen right now.
Yeah. Sadly, when there's loss of life, it's horrible. But I hate when I see the left constantly politicizing it and using it to further their agenda, which I don't think really addresses the issue. I just looked up myself, just trying to find the Colorado laws, and I saw in an article, I don't want to say affirmatively that it's absolutely true, but in an article that I just read, it says that Colorado already has background checks. They already have magazine laws and red flag laws. In fact, they're one of the leaders, according to this article, about this, the gun issue and dealing with shootings. And yet we have this shooting. Isn't that funny? Maybe it's not the law-abiding citizen who goes and buys a gun lawfully to use it. Maybe it's a criminal that uses it to, or someone just absolutely crazy that wants to inflict harm and goes and doesn't follow the law or the procedures that are in place and uses this. So I hate to see it politicized and used to further restrict law-abiding citizens from their Second Amendment right to carry a firearm. And I also want to add, there's something else going on in this country, and we've seen it with all these riots and the politics of the response to the riots. If you remember all summer long with the Black Lives Matter and the billions of dollars in damage and burning and looting that went on, and it was allowed to go on and take place where the law enforcement was pulled back. This is outrageous. But then when it goes to protesting the Capitol, they are going after these people like they are terrorists. And it's just shocking. But the point I'm trying to make is when the government no longer even-handedly decides to protect us, and they're only going to choose to enforce the law and protect the public when it's an issue that they agree with, but when it's something that they want to take place, they pull back law enforcement and they allow people to be hurt and injured. Like when you look at Seattle, they were storming the federal courthouse for weeks, terrorizing it, and law enforcement was pulled back. They were allowed to do it. And they had the audacity to file a lawsuit requesting, because they are subject to the police interference, sometimes with tear gas, that they were suing to try to get protective equipment for the protesters because of the police response. It's outrageous. We've lost our moral compass in this country. So the point being that if the government is not going to enforce laws and keep the public safe, now more than ever, we need to have firearms available for law-abiding citizens to protect themselves.
Okay.
So these things are going to happen. They have been happening. It's not because of good citizens who are buying firearms legally to protect themselves. There are these outliers, and that nobody should have to lose their rights because of crazy people.
Well, Joe, one of the I mean, you covered a lot of area right there, but I want to specifically focus on the Boulder, Colorado incident right at this point in regards to the mental health of the person that was able to buy a firearm 6 days ago. Not just a firearm, but a very it was a Ruger AR-556 pistol, which a semi-automatic pistol. I read in an article, I don't know if it's true or not, that it was capable of holding a 30-round clip. I don't know if, in fact, the shooter had a 30-round clip. But Pete, this directed at you. What is your take on the shooting in Colorado?
I honestly don't know where to begin. Based on, we have to be very careful on what information that we're using because a lot of erroneous information already came out. It seems to me that the media is now engaged in a full-blown spin with this thing. Yesterday, Blue and On crowd, people on the left, went absolutely overjoyed when they saw what they thought to be a white guy let out of that supermarket. That said, turns out this guy is a man of Syrian descent. He's of the Muslim faith. And all of a sudden, it goes dead quiet. Now, I did a fair amount of research today. We're trying to find, valid reporting the best I could. And this guy has had problems, and this is coming from a family member. He's had major issues since 2014. A lot of it sounds like some kind of paranoia, possibly schizophrenia, people following him, and all sorts of crap going on. Okay, my question is, what did you people do about it? Okay, and he bought the gun 6 days ago, but family members saw this guy playing with the gun in the house. Did you call the police? Did you take the gun away from him? This guy's been a time bomb now, according to some high school students he went to school with. He's been arrested for assault. Trying to gather information on what this guy's background is, they immediately shut down his social media accounts yesterday. Like I said, I take it some of the stuff with a grain of salt because they're saying he may have been an adherent of ISIS. There's other unconfirmed stuff coming out that there's like over 20 people living in the house where he's at. And as we know, it came out last night, this guy was on the FBI's radar. After all afternoon, we listened to the FBI saying, no, we're not looking at this guy. Well, it turns out he's associated with the guy that they were seriously looking at. Nobody's using the terrorism word yet, but apparently there's an active investigation, and this guy pops up as a subject in that case. I'm not putting the blame on the FBI for this. I'm not.
Right.
You know as well as I do, there is just a tremendous amount of material that comes in. There's only so many people to work on it, so many hours in a day. And barring them getting further information, like people calling up and saying, like, hey, this guy's a problem, okay? It didn't go too much further, except it was a guy possibly they're looking at with ISIS leanings. The mental health issue is well known. What did the school do? Apparently, this kid knocked another kid out in school 3 years ago, punched him in the head, knocked him out cold.
And he took an arrest for that. That should have precluded him from obtaining a firearm, correct?
I don't think so because it was a misdemeanor arrest. But, all this hoopla about, well, it could have been stopped because as of 10 days ago, you weren't allowed to purchase those firearms. The guy's got a driver's license. Colorado's a big state. You go over to the next county, and you can buy a handheld nuclear weapon. All right, so I mean, it's a moot point. They can carry on all. They are going to hammer home the issue about firearms.
Guys, I just want to share the screen for a second with the Colorado chief of police, who you could see how upset she is in this picture here, and she's going to talk to us here.
We don't hear.
You're not hearing it? Okay.
Yeah,
I'm going to stop the share right now. But what she was talking about, and you could see how upset she was. She was talking about the loss of life of one of her officers by the name of Eric Talley, who came on the job actually when he was 40 years old. And
wow.
he has 11 years on the job. And he's the father of 7 kids, which is like horrendous. There's Eric Talley right there. And as police officers do across the country, he knew what he was facing. He didn't hesitate to go into that supermarket and confront this shooter. And for his efforts, he took a bullet to the head and he lost his life. And when you hear all this anti-police stuff, you can't help but say, in this profession, there are heroes. And surely Eric Talley is a hero. But that doesn't do his 7 kids any good. They are all now without a father,
Billy, just to put it out there for the audience, the Boulder, Colorado Office of Emergency Management has set up a fund. I don't have the link. I don't have it right in front of me. There is one specifically designated fund for the families of people who've killed, but they've also set up one. I mean, in a situation like this is absolutely horrendous. With his youngest son is 5 years old.
Yeah.
This is absolutely horrible.
And for the thing is, there's definitely a worthy cause to take care of this officer's family. 7 kids, and just imagine having a change of career at the age of 40, and starting as a rookie at 40 years old, with any police department. It's no easy thing,
I started my second 20 years when I was 40. I retired at 40 and came back.
Well, Pete, they may want to do some psychological evaluation of you too, but I know we appreciate your service, and I know how long that you were on this job. When we talk about active shooters, it goes back to one of the most famous incidents also happened in the state of Colorado, and that was, of course, Columbine, where 2 kids, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, were being bullied. That's what was the reason given. And they went into the school heavily, heavily armed, and they killed, I believe, 12 or 14 students and faculty. And the police were heavily criticized because back then the procedure was not to go in and confront the shooters. And that was almost like emergency service or SWAT team procedure all over the country. And that incident changed that procedure. You have any thoughts on that, Joe?
I don't know how those. I mean, we as cops. I mean, how could you ever not, immediately pursue something like that? To say that they should hold back. I don't know how I could go into a scene like that, especially as a father, when there's kids involved. So, I certainly support the police and what they do, but I just can't see how anyone could stand back. I remember the one in Florida where the resource officer was criticized for standing back. I just cannot support that. I mean, how did he not enter and try to stop this shooter? So
there was a secondary issue with that. One of the captains on scene ordered the Broward guys not to go in. The standard operating procedure since Columbine, and there's been a lot of thought, a lot of work that went into this over the years. As soon as you get a couple of cops together, if you've got an active shooter, go in. You're not waiting for additional resources. You have to go in. The only thing that's going to stop an active shooter is another active shooter in blue uniforms.
Yeah.
And that guy, down in actually Coral, it was either Coral Springs or Coral Gables PD, turned around and said, they were from a different jurisdiction and they stormed in and, they saved lives. You cannot stand down. I'm looking at the timeline from yesterday's incident. The initial calls came in like around 2:36, 2:38. The officer entered the place at 2:50. And it appears that there's some knucklehead. It's a separate subject, but a quote unquote constitutionalist type reporter who was videoing. He was actually live streaming from the scene. He didn't call 911. He yelled at everybody else to call 911. And then he proceeded to fight with every cop there when they told him to get out of the hot zone. So I'm not a fan of this guy. But, we don't know the actual timeline yet as to how they entered, how many guys entered or gals to take this guy out. The store is huge. The store is absolutely huge. But what do we see last night? All right. 58 minutes into the incident, Fatso there is, and like I said, they said this guy's 21. It's just 21. I said, it looks like he's 42.
Yeah.
When he's being walked out, the criticism began immediately from the left. Yeah. Oh, he's white. That's why they didn't kill him. I get into a couple engagements with some Twitter types. My point is the reason why he walked out alive is because he surrendered. When you surrender, you get handcuffed. You want to fight, you're going down hard. And it has absolutely no play on what your color is. As I said, look at it this way. Just say me or you or Joe, we're patrol sergeants, whatever, Joe showing up sector. We see one of the guys we work with shot through the head on the floor. All right? You're pumped. You're already in a shooting, an active shooter. Now there's a guy for 11 years laying there dead. I says, trust me, if the cops, if this guy had given them an inkling or he was still shooting at them, they would have killed him. No doubt in my mind. They would have went in and killed him. Right. Man threw his guns down, his hands up, and surrendered. That's the difference.
Cops, well, Pete, there's usually three ways in which an active shooting ends, and it's the perp is killed by the police, the perp kills himself, or the perp surrenders. And in this incident, the perp surrendered because even though he had the unmitigated audacity to kill 10 people, most of these people are cowards. And that's, and when they were faced with overwhelming force, they surrender, and that's what this guy did.
Yeah, at that point, there were numerous officers. There were multiple SWAT teams entering the building, different agencies. They got there pretty quick. What's boggling with that video is that there's people just walking around. They didn't have the store where's the milk section? I got to go over to Dwayne, paying absolutely no mind to the carnage that's transpiring around them. But it goes back to, all right, the three of us are retired guys. You know what? I really don't give a shit, pardon my French, about your gun-free zones, no matter where they are. I'm a police officer. I've been a police officer for 40 years, carrying my gun. All right, I understand if it's a private venue, you don't want me in there. Well, you know what? I got that. But you know what? I'm walking in and out of the supermarket. I'm going to be carrying a weapon. Why do you have to break law enforcement shoes and law-abiding gun owners, the majority of whom never, ever cause a problem with the gun? You know what? Maybe had there been some guy out there, some cowboy, or somebody who knows how to handle a gun, said, no, bro, not today. And engage this guy and slow him down for a couple of minutes until, the troops respond. This is the guy. This guy would have got punched in the face and handcuffed to a tree if I was there. He was that obnoxious.
They're up on this. Yeah, this is probably that.
He's yelling at the cops. I'm a constitutionalist reporter.
Yeah, he's an idiot. He's a
moron.
Typical idiot,
And he kept it up. He fought with the cops out there for almost an hour. I would have punched him in the face and knocked him out,
I don't want to hear that. Let's just look at what's going on. I don't want to hear the people's. The media loves that. You know, the point of view of. Yeah.
That's actually heartbreaking with that police officer with those kids. Heartbreaking that anybody died, but here's this guy that took on a tough job at the age of 40, you know, wanted to be of service.
Yeah.
And 7 kids, and you're dead because of some scumbag, whatever his problem was. Either he's mentally screwed up or he was going to raise the ISIS flag. I don't know. It's absolutely, it's heartbreaking.
You know, the bruises that law enforcement has taken this year are somewhat still fresh, you know, and in everyone's mind. And mostly the wounds have been coming from the government and people criticizing the police, defund the police. The police did this wrong. The police need more training. We're describing riots as protests. You know, I think the police in almost every jurisdiction in this country have had it. And it's very tough probably these days to recruit people to become police officers. Joe, you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I sadly, you know, just even my own family, my daughter took the NYPD test, the Nassau County test, the Suffolk County test. She just graduated college, but she was in college and she got called by the NYPD. And I was just so, you know, beaming with pride that she would want to do that job, to serve the community and work as a police officer, especially that her father was a police officer. So I really just, you know, felt so good by that as to the child that we've raised, her mother and I. However, I can't tell you how glad I am that she decided to defer, and she's now graduated with her and passed her boards. Good job, Casey, with her BSN. And I'm glad that she's not taking that job because, like you said, you know, police have been under attack like never before, mostly from the government or the government gaslighting the public against them. And like I alluded to at the riots over the summer, there were punching bags. And we saw it on video. The chief of department cracked in the head with a bat. I mean, it doesn't get worse than that. And then, you know, they also had him kneeling down, you know, for a crowd, you know, appeasing the people. I don't want my daughter to be part of that. And I'm so glad she made the choice not to enroll in the police department. But I have to tell you, I was proud of that she wanted to serve the public in that fashion. But it's a problem that I think is going to be nationwide, recruiting good quality people.
Well, you know, Joe, one of the things I always hear, and you hear it from politicians all the time, is when police do something that they consider wrong, you always hear them say, oh, they need better training. They don't mean that. The politicians don't mean that because training costs money. They don't want to spend the money. Training takes a cop off the road. Right. They don't want to take the cop off the road. So when they say that, they're lying. They're totally 100% lying. Pete, your thoughts on that?
You know, we're in a mayoral election here in New York City.
Yes.
All the front runners want to reform the police. All of them. Yang, Eric Adams, the other putz, Scott Stringer. Oh, we need to reform the police. No, you know what you need to do? And I know this is kind of harsh. You need to reform the public, okay? It's not acceptable to lay your hands on a police officer. The behavior of last summer became normalized. Ooh, cop shoved me. Shoved you. If you were carrying on like that back in the 80s, you would have been kabonged. We would have knocked you out, and you would have been collared. And guess what? When you start treating these people the way they need to be treated during a riot and put their asses in jail, guess what? You know, riot's over. I'd say probably about 70 or 80% of the people that were participating in these marches and stuff last year never been involved with the criminal justice system. You know, the kids from NYU and everybody's woke. Guess what? cracked, cuffed, and the next thing you know, you're in Central Booking eating a bologna and cheese sandwich. You know what? It kind of takes the zest out of being a social justice warrior. You know, well, I retired in the end of July. I was out there for the month of June for these riots. In 39 years, I could not believe what I saw and the abuse that these cops put up with.
Yeah, Pete, there's a picture of you on the screen. It's hard to find a decent picture of you anywhere, you know? Whereas, you know, Joe Murray, he's got pictures all over the place, you know, and professionally, look at this. There you got Joe Murray. He's trying to get clients, you know?
That was the district attorney there.
Yeah.
But, you know,
you know, I just wanted to say something also. I don't, you know, we've made this in a way pretty political, talking about our resistance towards some of the things that are done with police, but it always comes back to talking about gun control, you know, and some of the strictest laws in the nation have the worst gun violence in the nation. For example, Chicago. Just about every weekend in Chicago, 60 to 70 people get shot, and another, you know, 8 to 10 murdered with firearms. But you never hear politicians talking about gun control in Chicago, because you know why? Because they have some of the strictest gun laws in the nation, but the worst gun crime.
You know, they talk about what happened Monday, yesterday in Colorado. On Monday, you had 15 people shot in Chicago. 15 shot, I believe it's 4 DOAs. And that's a daily occurrence out there. Yet it's nobody wants to go there because for the most part, it's black on black crime. And everybody's like, oh, you can't say that, you know. And we know from our experience here, there were numerous shootings that we handled that involved 4, 5, 6 victims. And you know what? You might get a story in the paper for a day and then it's gone. The violence is here and it's getting worse because they've just completely shut the cops down. But what tools? You've decriminalized all crime, basically. Everybody even for robberies and burglaries now, you get the DAT. And, you know, what is the point of even getting involved and locking people up anymore? That's never been me as a cop. But
you know,
this is
I
the
think
insanity.
we have to touch upon what's been the problem with these active shooter incidents, and many times it's been the mental health or the mental illness of the shooter, and the fact that these people are getting access to guns. I think as police officers, former police officers, we're all very much pro Second Amendment. We believe in the right to bear arms, but I can deal with restrictions. I can deal with a waiting period. I can deal with background checks. I think that's fine. But the problem is the right goes too far and the left goes ridiculous. The left, the guy Beto O'Rourke was talking about gun confiscation. You know, when the government says things like that, you know, they scare the hell out of people.
Yeah, but Beto never tells you how he's going to do it. He's going to, I'll tell the cops to do it. You know what, Beto? You can come knock on my door and see how it goes. I got into a blowout last year over this with somebody who carrying on about, oh, we should have these mental health checklists. I says, hold on a second. Here's the point you don't understand. First off, what is the criteria to say somebody's mentally deranged and not have a weapon? What happens if somebody is, you know, they go through treatment and they recover and, you know, say they have a bout of depression and they, you know, they bounce back and they resume their lives or whatever. So you go on this list. Are you coming off this list? Who's privy to this list? How do you legally get your name off this list? You know, it's the scarlet letter. And never mind the fact that you get some serious issues with HIPAA laws. I understand that crazy people shouldn't have guns. I get it. Who's going to make that determination and what sort of system are you going to have in place to ensure that people are treated fairly? This is a can of worms that nobody really, you know, once you start getting into the nuts and bolts, all of a sudden that people are standing there with their thumbs up their ass because they're like, oh, I didn't think of that. Yeah, okay.
Well, Joe, you're an attorney. Thoughts about that, of how we do that?
Yeah, I could give you a perfect example. I had a client who applied to become a police officer. He already had a pistol permit for years with no issue. And once he completed all his processing, he was told to surrender his firearm and permits at his resident precinct because he'd be entering the academy. I don't know for the life of me what one has to do with the other. If he's a lawful gun owner, why should he have to surrender that because he's entering the police academy? I don't understand that. But however, that was the department policy. So he's about to go in the academy, and then he doesn't make the class, and he applies for his permit back to get it back, and he's denied. So the reason for the denial was that he failed to meet the criteria for joining the police department. So, on the appeal that I did, I challenged them. I said, where in the regulations or the law anywhere or case law does it say that a person applying for a permit has to meet the criteria required of police officers to be a police officer in order to possess a firearm? So we went back and forth with the department. It also came out that in the NYPD, they're not allowed to share anything exchanged during the applicant processing, like any of your medical or evaluations that are done. They're not allowed to share it, and they didn't share it. And the department acknowledged it because in my request to them, I said, I want to have all the documents that you had in your possession to make this determination. So they came back with nothing and then granted our appeal. So I think it's this knee-jerk reaction that the government has without well thought out rules and regulations that are in place. I do think that there should be, some type of like you said, a reasonable restriction, like a delay, a waiting period, or a background check. Reasonable, but we know how the government is the worst at doing anything, and how things get screwed up, and you get on a list somewhere. How do you get off it? And again, are you going to punish people who sought help and tried to get help, or had other issues like you mentioned about substance? Are they now precluded and disqualified? I think it really needs to be discussed. But the best weapon we have is not more restriction. It's public awareness. Ever since 9/11, you've been hearing, you see something, say something. That goes for the nut job that has an AR-15 and he's running around talking about killing people. Like that, the public, I think we are more motivated than ever before post 9/11 to pick up the phone, and we have the resources. Here we have 311. You can call them for anything. So I think, we need to be more vigilant as a society, but I'm not for restricting lawful people to own and have a firearm now more than ever, because the government is being politicized and the police force is politicized as to what they're going to, have officers protect, and what instances where they're not going to have enforcement and they're going to allow crime to take place.
Well, Joe, the state of Colorado has probably gotten hit harder than almost any other state in regards to active shooters. And just to name a couple, we mentioned Columbine, and then there was the one in the movie theater with the guy dressed as it was at the Batman film, and he killed 12 people and shot 58 people. I mean, that stings not just a city, but an entire state. And then they had about 4 or 5 other ones. So I don't know what it is with Colorado that elicits a lot of active shooter incidents, but they've had their share of pretty bad ones. What's that, Pete?
They're smoking too much weed out there.
Is it the high altitude? I don't know.
It could be the altitude. The air gets thin at 5,000 feet.
But, correct me if I'm wrong. Like I said, I was doing a little research on this today. Colorado apparently has a magazine law. They have a background check law. They also have red flag laws that I just don't believe in. They have this stuff in place. So what went wrong? What happened?
That's a good question. Aaron Rodriguez, thank you so much for the $24.99 super chat. Thanks for supporting Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. And thank you, Angel Bones. Hello, Janine Goodwin. Just going to shout out to some of our chatters. Mike Ferrone, Polka Dot Suzanne, Moonlight View, Reynoldson Diaz, Melody McAtee, Michael McAuliffe, Sean McCabe, Scott Wagner, Nathaniel Sam, Diane Brooks. Of course, Peter Pranzo is here. I didn't see Richella. Is Richella here too? I saw Peter. Joanne Blasich. Hello, Joanne. It's so nice to see you. You must not be teaching this afternoon, but great to see you guys. Thank you guys for your support. Let's also touch upon the incident in Atlanta. And Pete, you want to narrate this one? The other active shooter at the massage parlors.
Well, you have a guy, okay, which, one thing that's constant in pretty much all these shootings that we're discussing, there were warning signs in each and every case that trouble, was brewing. So you get this guy who's basically a sex addict, and he goes in and starts taking out these massage parlors. And, people are carrying on. I flipped my lid the other day reading one of the obituaries.
Not you, Pete. You didn't do that, did you?
reading one of the stories about the woman that ran the massage parlor. All right, let's stop with the nonsense here. It's a prostitution setup, the rub and tug. You're not going in there for a massage. Let's put it that way. So this how she was a nice woman and this and that. And my point was stop right there. This is a pimp. She's a madam.
Oh, she's a madam. Yes. Yeah.
She's a person that's engaging in human trafficking for the sex industry. A lot of these ladies that are employed in these businesses, they have to work their head off in these locations for a couple of years. So basically, you're an indentured slave. And so, I don't want to sugarcoat it. I don't want to take away from the victims. But you have a guy here that, they start carrying on, it's an Asian hate crime. No, you have a guy here that has a serious psychosexual issue and rage with women. And, he exploded and he took it out on them. And if you look at it, look at Ted Bundy, look at a guy like David Berkowitz. Both guys, major rage issues with women. But this guy did it all in one shot. What happens in the end, when this guy's confronted by the police, hands go up. When you look at the guy and you see the photos of this guy, he doesn't look like he's going to brawl with the cops.
No.
But that's the point that people need to understand. We're not murderers. You put your hands up, it's over. And this guy was another guy that was been picking and just turning up the heat over the last couple of years, and he exploded. I'm not going with the whole Asian
the bias incident that they've been trying to sell to everyone. Yeah.
I'm going along the line that this guy is because he also killed two other women in the place. I think one may have been Caucasian, the other one may have been Hispanic. And, this is a psycho. This is a guy that definitely should not have had a gun, without a doubt. And I'm sure once we do a deep research into this man's background, the warning signs were there. Same way the warning signs were there in Colorado.
Well, Pete, when you see the guy, to me, when I read the same story as you on the shooter in the Boulder, Colorado case, his name was Ahmad Al-Alawi Alisa, and he was a Syrian immigrant. There was allegedly 20 people living in the house, and it raised the antenna of the FBI. They were aware of these people. But the fact that he had mental health issues and he was playing with a gun while dressed in, army gear and wearing a bulletproof vest, and he's messing around with it in his living room, and his sister-in-law thought, "Oh my God, this is crazy." Well, then why didn't she do something about it? Here's a nut with a gun, with a very serious type of gun. It was an AR .556 pistol, which I'm not a big gun buff, so I don't know that much about this gun.
Basically, it's an AR-15 round. Looks somewhat like an AR. There's a whole bunch of attachments you can put on it. But basically, it's that caliber round shortened into a pistol. It's not exactly a small weapon, all right? It's sizable, but by the same token, you have a heavy caliber round. It's going to do damage in pistol form. But then again, all these signs were there. This guy's a ticking time bomb, at least since 2014. The family sees this jackass with a gun. What did you do? Did nothing. It's
something. Also, there apparently had been some complaints from people living on the block about that family, that there was always like 20 or 30 people living in the house. People were coming and going all hours of the night, which sometimes is indicative of drug sales going on in the house. But they had some contact with the FBI. The FBI knew about them. It seems like in all of these active shooters, the FBI knew about the person, but it didn't rise to the level where they could do anything.
The Parkland case, that guy was, the flags were everywhere. And people were telling the FBI that this twisted fool is posting stuff on Facebook about taking people out and taking the school out. There were going back months before the actual incident. There were people that were calling up about this kid and said, "Hey, this is a problem. This kid's twisted." And what happened? Nothing.
Let me throw something out.
Go ahead, Joe.
Just when you talk about like all these woke people that now want all of this reform, where you can, you can expunge your criminal record and have your convictions removed, and then all of this advocacy to allow these mentally ill people to be released from institutions and on the street. On one hand, they're desperate to try to restore people's rights and have them not disenfranchised. But on the other hand, they now want to restrict their rights and take that away. And I just can't reconcile this wokeness. It's either one or the other. You want public safety, there's a way to do that, accomplish that. And we were doing that. We were locking people up, both, the criminally insane people and other people with severe mental issues. They were institutionalized. Now they're taking them all out, releasing them, and they are getting access to guns, and they're having incidents like this. So I think we need to just clarify what it is, the role of government. Is it to protect its society and people, and how best to do that? I think the constitutional framework for that is the least restrictive means the government can impose to infringe on your constitutional rights. Whatever that is, I'm all for it if we can do that. But I fear that it's going to go well beyond that, and they're going to take away our constitutional rights instead of, reasonably regulating them.
Well, Joe, one of the things that I noticed a lot of times is when someone would get arrested, and of course they would say, "Oh, this is his criminal history." And I noticed a lot of people, social justice warriors are like, "What does that have to do with anything?"
Exactly.
And we know that past conduct says everything about what's going to happen in the future. If you're a criminal in your past, you're probably going to be a criminal in your future. Not everyone, but most of the time. So past behavior is a pretty good indicator of future behavior. And I think that the 3 strikes laws and escalating penalties for persistent felony offenders, because it is true that, I don't know the exact number, but just take the ratio. 20% of the population is committing 80% of the crime. They're going to be criminals. There are exceptions. So yes, we want to know who they are. Why are we wiping their records clean? And I cannot reconcile what the left is trying to do. They're madly trying to
restore everyone and give them all their rights and freedoms. But, oh my God, because we've done that and there's no way that we can, otherwise regulate firearms, let's take it away from everyone. It's just outrageous.
Well, Joe, I think the overriding goal of sort of woke society is something called decarceration.
Yes.
And what that is basically just emptying all the prisons and all the jails, because someone decided that the United States incarcerates way too many people for a Western civilized country. And so the people that object to that, or people that find that so horrendous, they're going to do that by emptying. And thus you see things like bail reform, parole, releasing cop killers, all of those things that we as law enforcement would strenuously object to are now just becoming part of the way governments do business right now.
Well, here's an issue with, I don't think that word even existed a couple of years ago, decarceration.
Right.
But it's now the policy. Now, I didn't see this with my own eyes. But apparently, this is actually the official policy of the Manhattan DA's office of what they're pushing now, of what they're trying to achieve, is decarceration. And I'm like, okay, I understand that. We're trying to do the best for everybody here. But the bottom line is there's always going to be a criminal element out there. Right now, there's no reason to stop committing crimes right now. There are basically no penalties. And we saw this coming. Nobody wanted to listen to the cops. And they don't have a problem with it. It's like, to these people, it's not a problem. But you know what? To the Asian lady that's 65 or 70 years old that got punched in the face on Canal Street, guess what? That's an assault recall. And you just got some whack job running around punching people, unless there's something there to raise it to a bias crime. And even then, they're not going full tilt after these people. So you've basically told, hey, do what you want. This is a free-for-all now in New York City. And you listen to what's coming out of the mouths of these candidates. You have to be out of your mind to vote for anybody.
Hey, Pete, do you think that any of the Democrat candidates would agree to come on Police Off the Cuff?
I do.
What do you think? I don't think they would either. I think, I'm not going on that show.
I actually think they would. There's so many of them. They're all looking for ways to distinguish themselves and to come on here and bash cops and then play that everywhere.
I would love to ask them, what is your plan in regards to the rising amount of murders, homicides, street crime, the homeless on the subway, what is your plan? What's the plan? Yeah. I would love just to ask them that. How hard is that to answer?
The guy who we really should try and get on here is Eric Adams. He was a police captain on the job for 30 years.
Yeah.
But you listen to some of the stuff that's and you know what? He's not a stupid guy.
He's not. He's a smart guy.
He knows exactly what the job is. He knows what goes on. And he knows criminals. He understands this. But you listen to what's coming out of his mouth, and you're like, bro, really? Are you insane? Last summer, he went out and says, hey, people, if people are shooting fireworks off in your block, go out and tell them to stop. And on July 4th, over in the pink houses, the lady went out to tell the guy down the street to stop. And you know what? He blew her brains out and killed her. That was Eric Adams' advice. They're all pushing the same thing. And it's always reform the police, defund the police.
Well, I've heard the word training come out of his mouth a few times too, and I would tell him to his face, "You don't mean that. You totally do not mean it."
He doesn't. He absolutely does not mean it.
No, of course not. And none of them mean it, because they know training costs money, and they know training takes the cop off the road. They can't afford the money, and they can't afford to take the cop off the road.
But it's just not an agenda, And you think about the people that are pushing for this, the woke crowd. What is the actual percentage of these people in New York City? It's not that big. Most people that are up there trying to work and just go through their lives, they want safe streets, okay? Those same people, though, are not out protesting and carrying on. They're busy raising their families, working, going about their life. Then you got to listen to a bunch of ass clowns, protesting in Foley Square, whatever it is. Oh, the police and this, all cops are bastards and all this nonsense. And you know what? They're the people that are driving the conversation. De Blasio plays to them, he certainly does. And it's really a small number of people that are really setting the agenda here. I don't, the only thing that's becoming apparent to me is you just got to get up in their face now and tell them, no, you know what? I'm not buying it. I'm not listening to it. And you're wrong. Simple as that. I mean, people have to get loud. There's no reason why working people just trying to live their lives, and not have safe communities. We had safe communities for over 20 years, and I mean some tough neighborhoods. And you know what? They became safe.
Yeah.
And look where we're at now. Would you ever think that this would happen?
I hate to say this, but we started out with active shooters and we're solving all the problems of New York City right now. I'd like to get back to what do we do about active shooters? And on one hand, you have the gun control people. And the other hand, you have the mental health people. And then the other hand, you have people that don't want the police to do their job. So, Joe, what do we do about this problem with active shooters?
I think, is it fair to say that we're seeing more of it now than we have in the past? Is it fair to say? Do you think? Do we see more?
I don't think specifically. I'd have to look at the numbers nationally. Yeah, we don't get many active shooters in New York City.
Yeah, no.
Why is that?
Statistically, no, we're not.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So one of the things I was going to say is what I was getting at. Like, we used to lock up bad guys and remove them from society. We used to not incarcerate, but we used to institutionalize mentally ill people and remove them from society. And why is that? Because that's the government's role, to protect us. That's the social contract. That's why we all don't walk around with six shooters. This isn't the Wild West. We have law enforcement. We have government that will do their role to protect us from the people who will harm us. I think we have to revisit that. A lot of these mentally ill people that are out there that shouldn't be out there we have a second look at that. We also have terrorism. I don't know if this is a terrorist attack or this is a radicalized person, but we have in every police department, they have intelligence. And that should be something that should be pursued and followed. Again, the goal should be to remove people who are causing harm to society. The goal of government is to protect society. But unfortunately, the left is making society more dangerous for us. And I think this type of behavior comes out of that. People that probably shouldn't be out and about or in otherwise radicalized or are criminals.
Joe, I just like to let all our listeners know that Joe Murray's a retired NYPD police officer. He's an attorney, and he ran for Queens District Attorney. We pushed hard for him, but
yes, you did.
In this climate, I think they wanted someone that was a little further left than you were, or a lot further left.
If my election was last November, I would have done so much better. Right now, we had the bail reform, discovery reform, all that stuff coming out, and I was trying to warn people, hey, look what's coming down the pike, closing Rikers Island, releasing thousands of inmates. It didn't happen yet. So it was so hard to catch that, that vibe when during my campaign. But 2020 would have been a great year. Who knows? I may do it again.
You're going to run again, you think?
I might.
I don't know. It takes a lot of energy. And I know you love your law practice. And,
I love what I do, but I got to tell you, I really had fun campaigning. It was like being a cop again. I was out on patrol, meeting people, talking to people. It was
You were
fun.
shaking hands and kissing babies and all that stuff, right?
It was called a racist and, all kinds of horrible things by some people, but that was part of being a cop.
Yeah.
So, it was fun.
12-Step Woman, thank you so much for the $4.99 super chat. Bill Ryan, thank you for the $4.99 super chat. This is Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. My two guests are retired Sergeant Extraordinaire, 39 years worth, Pete Panuccio, and of course, retired NYPD police officer, amazing attorney, and maybe future Queens District Attorney candidate, Joe Murray. Joe was also a boxer, and he's a handsome guy. He could be the Cosmopolitan Bachelor of the Month, except I know his girlfriend. She may call me and say, "Don't you ever say that again."
She's in earshot too.
Oh, I'm in trouble then. So what are we are we going to solve this problem? Or this is always going to be a problem, but the right is always going to say Second Amendment, and the left is always going to say we need more gun control. That's what we're used to. That it's been happening for years. What are your thoughts, Pete?
Well, you got to remember, if somebody's determined to do something, they're going to do it. It'll be, look at the guy that we had on the West Side Highway a couple of years ago, plowed through 8 people with his truck. They're going to find a means to do what they're, whoever they want to go out and harm, be it terrorism, be it the voices in their head. There's always going to be a means. From the law enforcement perspective, we need to drill down when it needs to be some sort of sharing of information between people that become dangerously psychotic and just routine stuff, cross-checking, pistol licenses, rifle permits. I understand that can't be done in every jurisdiction, but it's a start.
Well, Pete, the HIPAA laws fly in the face of that. And for our listeners that don't know what that is, that's your right as a patient to not have your information released. And I remember as a sergeant in Manhattan North Homicide, I would call the hospital asking about the condition of someone who was just shot, and they would say, "Oh, we can't tell you." I'd be like, "Will you stop? The guy was shot. I'm the police. Tell me what his condition is." And usually they would relent, but sometimes they would hide behind those HIPAA laws. And look, it's no small thing. I don't want my medical records, thrown out to everyone and discussed. I want them to be private. But then with bigger issues like gun control and people getting a gun license, maybe you could have to sign a waiver if you do want that gun permit, that yes, you can check my medical records, my psychological records in order for me to apply for this gun permit. Joe, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I don't think that's the way to do it, but I think there are reasonable ways to do it to allow.
I thought I had a great idea. You just blew me out of the water right there.
But I think, just common sense wise, if someone goes to law enforcement and says, I'm observing this type of behavior on someone, they should then, if there's enough evidence, and it's good evidence and credible evidence, to get a warrant, look at your records, to look at something that, might be telling about your history. But, my fear is that a lot of these people don't have histories because we don't do that. We don't take people off the street anymore. I mean, these EDPs are barely held and then just released. They're not institutionalized. They're not treated. They're not observed. We can't really make that out.
Joe, when they take the police out of a lot of their past functions and start putting civilians in it, that is dangerous. In fact, I just read today they're trying to have civilians investigate motor vehicle accidents. What about when the driver is DWI? What about when the driver is fleeing an unarmed robbery? Are you still going to have civilians investigating car accidents? I mean, very ill.
Driver with a suspended license or a fake license, or what about that? Why don't we have police officers doing that? Who's going to do that?
They're talking about AIS being civilians.
Here's a for instance. When you got the guy who's now the president of the United States coming out and saying, well, cops should just shoot him in the leg. Well, I got news for you. Half of New York City, if we were allowed to shoot people in the legs, half the city would be limping.
I know you thought of that joke for a long time. You didn't just invent it right now.
No, that was the first thing that came to my head when he said that. I said, we'll be popping kneecaps. But here he is, he's coming out with these, and he says, We're going to send out social workers and psychiatrists. Are we going to hire a couple of 100,000 social workers and psychiatrists to go out and deal with every emotionally disturbed person in the United States? It's ludicrous. It's absolutely unworkable.
We all know,
ludicrous.
as being former law enforcement, one of the most dangerous jobs you ever go to is an EDP. Is that not correct?
That is 100% right.
And I mean, to send what they call as violence interrupters or social workers to EDPs, and for you non-police personnel, I know we throw around acronyms, but EDP means emotionally disturbed person. And in fact, they tried to soften it up a little bit more by saying emotionally distressed person. They didn't want disturb was too disturbing to say, so they changed it to distressed.
Yeah, you know what? When you go in the apartment, all of a sudden, you got a couple of social workers in there, and this guy decides, well, I'm not playing the game, and starts flinging them around the apartment. Their terminology is going to be, oh my God, we have a psycho on our hands. Yeah. And they're going to find out about EDP strength.
Yeah.
In human strength, right? They always used to say that this EDP is like the strength of, an EDP.
Well, how many times do you see these guys, especially if there's a weapon involved? Some of these guys take multiple hits in gunfights. They're out of their minds. They don't stop. They're hit with nightsticks. They're pepper sprayed. They're tased. They keep on fighting. And nobody ever knows what is going to happen when you knock on that door. Because when things go south, it happens in a second. You can go in there, and this guy could be saying, oh, hi, come on in. Oh, sure, I'll talk
Come into my lair.
And he's in there with a chainsaw. And, because he's already got his mind made up. He's not going back to an institution.
Right.
Oh, great. There's no cops here. I'm going to show
Pete, I don't know if you saw the video a couple of weeks ago of the two Queens cops that were called basically to do a close job for this woman to go back and get her stuff. And that would seem like, not the most dangerous job. The guy started shooting at them as they came in, and they exchanged gunfire with their boyfriend or husband. I mean, that very easily could have been handled by a civilian that didn't have a firearm, and we'd have a dead civilian,
I timed that. From the time she said, oh my God, he's coming down the street, it was under maybe from the second he appeared in the doorway, within a second and a half, these guys were trading shots. And they were in that room. That's a small room. It's a shooting gallery because everybody's firing shots. I'm absolutely amazed the cops got out of that. And, it's a testament. You want to talk about training? Those guys followed their training, and they survived a really bad incident.
But something, Pete, I want to ask you something, and Joe, you also. How many times a year do you go to the range?
I was going to bring that up. That's a great point. I remember when I was...
Is that enough training?
Of course not. No. It's bare minimum.
You're really just qualifying. You're not really training. I just want to bring this out. I was part of the pilot program for the 9mm. We had 38s, and I think they gave a few to each precinct. And it was so funny because Ali was my captain at the time, and we made a lot of collars, my partner and I. So he picked us for the 9mm. And, then after my incident, I ran into him.
You mean your EDP incident?
I ran into him, and he said, you know how much trouble you got me in? But anyway, just pointing that out, we had to qualify 4 times a year. We had to go, and it was a way to enforce practicing. We're allowed. We always had the right to go to any of the ranges. Like I would go to headquarters when I had to go down there for something and pop off 50 rounds. They would give us the rounds. They wanted us to practice. So,
cops, unless you're forced to do something, they're not going to do it. If you don't force a cop to shine his shoes, they'll look like, construction worker boots,
Billy, I'll tell you what, I was the buff. I would occasionally go to the range down in headquarters. They had an advanced combat course. It was a 4-hour course given by some hairy knuckle dragger from way back when from the range. And you know what? This guy gave you 4 hours of stuff that, we're not going to discuss this at the range. and out there and pushing you on the line. But unfortunately, it was a 4-hour course. It was voluntary. And, you know, other jurisdictions will qualify once a month. Some federal jurisdictions, like the air marshals, I think are qualifying almost like once a week because they're firing weapons inside an aircraft. Their training is absolutely, their marksmanship is stupendous.
You know, Pete, just my whole point is that a lot
We
of
get
these
the gun out,
politicians are always saying more training, but they don't mean it. They do not mean it.
They don't mean it. They're reducing our training.
I think with the firearms training, the city is putting out just enough to cover a liability issue down the line. Oh yeah, well he was trained.
Pete, they're also trying to teach.
No, we're not.
They're also trying to teach cops de-escalation training, where if someone's charging at you with a knife, that's not deadly physical force, which is totally ridiculous.
But Billy, this brings us to a whole separate point. Look at all these videos that we see these cops going on and on with these engagements, yelling and screaming, and then scuffling with them. You know, it becomes with each second as that thing is going on, the more dangerous it's becoming. Now you're involved in a prolonged physical fight with somebody. And you know what? I hate to be the guy that says, well, back in the day, you know what? You got told, listen, this is going to end. You're going to get locked up. There was no prolonged scuffles. I mean, it was punches, radios, nightsticks.
Yeah, no, you were taught to end the fight as quickly as possible.
End it. It's safer for everybody involved to end that fight as quickly as possible.
But now if you hit someone over the head with your radio, you'd get charged with assault too, and the perp would get released.
I'm glad I'm retired.
Yeah. Unless you have fists of iron like Joe Murray, you know.
Joe's special category.
Assault too.
He didn't have the speed, but he had the strength behind that punch, you know.
Yeah.
You know, guys, we're actually at 6 hours and 1 hour and 7 minutes at 6:07. 1 hour and 7 minutes, and I think we're gonna put our last words in there. I just wanted to show. I wanted to put this up there so everyone could see the people who were all killed in this incident in Colorado. It's a horror. Some great people. Eric Talley is the gentleman, the police officer in the middle of that shot. But these are real people. These people had real lives. These people had families. And in the case of Officer Talley, he had 7 kids. You know. So, Joe, last thoughts.
Yeah, you hit it right home. I remember just after 9/11 how my kids, my daughter was 3, so the next day when I had to go to work, she kissed me going, "Bye, Daddy." My son was 5, and his best friend in school, his father didn't come home.
Oh man!
So he was terrified, wouldn't let me go, and the only way I could console him to allow me to go to work was to tell him, I'm going there to look for your friend, you know, Ray's father, you know? So I really feel, I mean, these people, thank God I've never suffered that horrible tragedy, but I know these people are hurting. They are really hurting. And for these politicians that are just politicizing it, shame on them. We need to do something. Like I said, this is a social contract. Government is here so that we don't engage in self-help. Government is here to protect us, to protect society. What's the best way to do it? The least restrictive means, respecting our rights, but protecting us. We need to do that. And I think, you know, I commend you for starting the conversation. We need to have conversations like this, and everyone should be talking about it and kicking ideas around, spitballing. We'll come up with a plan. We will.
Well, Joe, that was pretty nuanced, and I appreciate your thoughts. Pete, you get the final word. Don't get carried away, though.
No, I won't. But you know what? Number one, public awareness. We need to train the public. The public needs to know what to look for. Can't be shy about it. I hate to say it. Can't be shy. Thorough and aggressive follow-up. There are going to be certain red flags that will pop up in investigations or calls that come in. And you know what? We have to get into it. You got to start cross-checking addresses. You got to check addresses, see who's got firearms in what locations. Does it get intrusive to firearm owners? Well, yeah, I can understand that, especially if you're a legitimate firearm owner. But then again, you got this guy boiling on the stove here for the last couple of days. And 6 days ago, he buys a assault type weapon. So, it's awareness, it's enforcement, and we're in dangerous times, and because the police are not being supported to do their job. They want us to do a job, they're not going to allow us to do the job, and they'd rather just bash us. This is dangerous times, and you know what? Just for me, I don't care about your gun-free zone. I'm walking through there with my gun.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you, Pete.
Had there been a civilian there armed with a firearm, maybe this could have been stopped. Maybe it could have been slowed down.
Well, he actually started shooting in the parking lot.
Yeah,
he walked into the store. Yeah.
Well, if I'm walking out the door with my Wheaties and and I see this guy popping off at old people, I'm a retired guy. I am letting loose with everything I got because what's coming next, and it's going to be the people in that store, right. And that can be anywhere. Thankfully, the media is going to beat this to death. Thankfully, the people don't realize these things are not as common as we believe. You get them in spurts like we did the last week. It's not as common, and you know what? Maybe they should pay attention to the mass casualty incidents that we see in Chicago, in New York City, where, these thugs are shooting up the streets and they're shooting.
In Baltimore, well, the other thing, I mean, not to change subject because we're trying to close out here, but in Miami, they took 80 guns off the street from the allegedly spring breakers. 80 guns. Why are you bringing a gun to spring break? I don't get
tourists.
it. Is there a competition? Is there some kind of shooting competition? But think of how dangerous that is. They recovered in 1 week 80 guns in Miami and South Beach.
Yeah, and everybody's looking up. I mean, which makes it even more dangerous. Everybody's drunk. They're brawling in the streets. But try keeping your police department though invested in the game and keeping their spirits up and everything. When they're constantly beat down by every politician out there, they have no use for us. But you're trying to keep these guys motivated and do a job. Then you have a guy like Police Officer Eric Talley that, no hesitation, jumped right into the battle, and he's dead. But the same group of people and politicians out there will have no problem a month from now turning around and crapping all over the heads of Boulder PD. So, it's I don't know what the answer is. It's not a good situation.
Pete, if we did know the answer, we wouldn't be sitting here on Police Off the Cuff. We'd have our own, TV show, I think, Although the people on TV certainly aren't smarter than we are, that's for sure.
No, we'd be running, we might be running cities.
You're right. We probably should be because we're smarter than most of the leaders. Anyway, guys, I want to thank retired police officer, attorney extraordinaire, and maybe future Queens District Attorney, Joe Murray. Always great to see you, Joe. I tell you, you're a handsome-looking guy too. You're a good-looking fellow. And of course, retired Sergeant Pete Panuccio, 39 years. I'm not even 39 years old. I don't know how he did 39 years. But anyway, all you people watching, this is Police Off the Cuff, real crime stories. Thank you so much for supporting us. I'm your host, Bill Cannon. Great to see you. Thanks, guys.
Good night, Bill. Good night, Joe.
Great seeing you. Good show, Bill.